The archive smelled like death. Not the sharp, sudden death of battle, but the slow, creeping death of things forgotten and left to rot. Dust covered every surface in the Imperial facility on Cathera, thick enough to show the small tracks where a dragon hatchling had paced back and forth, wearing paths in the grime. In the corner of the vast chamber, pressed against the cold stone wall, a small crimson shape huddled next to a thin figure with violet skin. Scarix, the baby dragon, pushed closer to Velix, seeking warmth that neither of them had left to give. The scholar's body temperature had been dropping for weeks now. Soon it wouldn't matter. Day 347, Velix whispered into the darkness. His voice cracked and broke like old paper. He lifted a piece of broken metal and scratched another mark into the stone wall beside him. The wall was covered with them now, neat rows of tallies that told the story of their slow dying. The Emperor will come. He must come. The words had become a prayer. A mantra. The only thing keeping Velix's mind from breaking completely under the weight of their situation. Scarix said nothing. The little dragon had stopped talking 3 days ago. Maybe 4. Time had become strange in the endless dark. His scales, which should have been the bright crimson of fresh blood, had faded to a dull rust color. Malnutrition did that to young dragons. Velix had read about it in the texts, back when reading mattered, back when he thought knowledge would save him. Across the room, the beacon continued its endless work. A small device, no bigger than Velix's fist, pulsing out a distress signal on Imperial frequencies. It had been calling for help for almost a year now. Calling and calling and calling into the void. The signal traveled through space at the speed of light, screaming that 2 Imperial subjects needed rescue. No one had answered. Velix remembered the day they'd gotten trapped. He'd been so excited to bring Scarix to the archive, to show him the forbidden texts of the old wars. Knowledge that the Empire had sealed away, deemed too dangerous for common citizens. But Velix was a scholar. He had clearance. He had permission. Then the purge happened. He still didn't know what political game had triggered it. Some high noble offending another? A power play in the Imperial court? It didn't matter. The order came down to seal the border facilities. Security protocols activated. Doors locked. Life support switched to emergency reserves. And the Empire moved on, drowning in its own vastness, too busy with politics and power to notice 2 insignificant lives left behind in the shuffle. The food synthesizer made a sound like a dying animal. Velix looked up, hope flaring in his chest for just a moment. Then the machine sputtered and wheezed, producing a thin stream of gray paste into the collection tray. It looked like wet ash. It tasted worse. Last one, Velix said quietly. He split the paste into 2 portions, pushing the slightly larger one toward Scarix. The dragon looked at it but didn't move. Please eat, Velix begged. Please. Scarix finally shifted, taking slow, painful bites. Each swallow looked like agony. He'll come, Velix repeated, though he no longer knew if he believed it. The Emperor protects all his subjects. It's written in the codes. The sacred duty of the throne is to safeguard every life in the Empire, from the highest noble to the lowest servant. We matter. We have to matter. But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at him. They'd been forgotten. Cast aside. Left to die alone in the dark because they were too small, too unimportant for anyone to bother checking on. Velix had always believed in the Empire. In the order it provided. The structure. The purpose. He'd memorized the codes as a child, believing every word about duty and honor and the Emperor's sacred obligation to his people. Now those words felt like lies. A sound cut through his spiraling thoughts. Not the steady pulse of the beacon. Something new. Something different. Scarix's head snapped up, his dulled eyes suddenly sharp. His nostrils flared wide, testing the stale air. A ship, he croaked, speaking for the first time in days. Velix scrambled across the floor on hands and knees, too weak to stand properly. His fingers found the sensor panel, fumbling over controls he'd checked 1,000 times before. The screen flickered to life, showing a ship's signature approaching the planet. His hearts, both of them, began to race. Then they sank just as quickly. The signature wasn't Imperial. No, Velix breathed. No, no, no. Pirates most likely. Or scavengers looking for salvage in abandoned Imperial facilities. Either way, they wouldn't care about 2 dying captives. They'd strip the archive for valuable technology and leave without ever knowing 2 lives had been waiting here. Velix felt tears burning in his eyes. To come so close. To have hope for just a moment only to have it ripped away. But then he heard something that made no sense. The sound of cutting tools. Rough, improvised, working against the outer door. Someone was forcing their way in. breaking through Imperial seals that should have been impossible to breach without proper codes. Scarix pulled himself to his feet, swaying. They're coming inside. Why would they come inside? Felix whispered. We're nothing. We have nothing worth taking. The cutting sounds grew louder. Closer. Metal screamed as it was torn apart. And then, after 347 days of darkness and silence and slow dying, light flooded into the archive. Two figures stood in the doorway, backlit and impossible to see clearly. But they weren't Imperial. Felix could tell that much. Wrong shape. Wrong size. Wrong everything. Someone was breaking in. And Felix didn't know if that meant salvation or something worse. Captain Jake Morrison stood outside the crumbling entrance to the Imperial Archive, staring at the readouts on his handheld scanner. 2 life signs. Both weak. One humanoid, one reptilian. The medical data scrolling across his screen made his jaw tighten. Both young. Both dying. Boss, we're deep in restricted space, Tom Edwards said from behind him. The pilot's voice carried an edge of worry as he kept checking his own scanner, watching for Imperial patrol signatures. If the Empire catches us out here, they won't just arrest us. They'll vaporize the ship and ask questions never. Jake didn't look away from the sealed door. Then they should have answered the distress beacon. What? That signal's been broadcasting for almost a year, Tom. On Imperial frequencies. Calling for help. Jake's voice went cold. And nobody came. So now we're here. Tom opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He'd been flying with Jake long enough to know that tone. The captain had made up his mind, and nothing short of an Imperial battle fleet would change it. Jake turned to the third member of their landing party. Lisa, get us through. Lisa Hayes grinned, already pulling the plasma cutter from her tool belt. Now you're speaking my language, boss. She fired up the cutter, and the business end glowed white-hot. When she pressed it against the ancient Imperial seal, the metal began to glow and melt like butter under a hot knife. These seals are supposed to be impenetrable, Tom muttered, watching the door give way. Military-grade Imperial security. Yeah, well, they didn't count on human stubbornness, Lisa said, sweat beading on her forehead as she worked. The cutter screamed against the metal, throwing sparks that lit up the dim corridor. Or proper tools. Give me 10 minutes with anything and I'll get it open. She was true to her word. 8 minutes later, the seal broke with a hiss of escaping air. The door groaned as they forced it open, centuries of dust billowing out in a choking cloud. Jake and Tom stepped inside first, flashlights cutting through the gloom like knives. The air inside tasted dead. Stale. Wrong. And then Jake's light found them. 2 shapes huddled against the far wall. Small. Fragile. Looking like they'd been carved from shadows and desperation. Felix stared at the intruders, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. These weren't Imperials. They weren't anything he recognized. He'd memorized the Galactic database as part of his scholar training. Every known species, every civilization, every member race of the Empire. These creatures weren't in it. They stood on 2 legs like him, but that's where the similarities ended. They were short by galactic standards, barely taller than Felix himself. Their faces were flat and strange, with small noses and mouths that seemed too expressive. Their skin looked soft, vulnerable, like it couldn't possibly protect them from anything. No scales, no natural armor, no obvious weapons. And they were looking at him with something that Felix couldn't identify. Something that made his chest hurt. Easy, kid, the leader said, his voice gentle. He holstered a weapon at his side and raised both hands, showing they were empty. We're here to help. You. Felix's voice came out as a broken whisper. You're not Imperial subjects. Nope, the female said. She was already moving toward Scarix, pulling out some kind of medical device that hummed as it scanned the little dragon. We're human. From Earth. And you two look like hell. She glanced at her captain, her expression going serious. Malnutrition, dehydration, early-stage organ failure for the scholar. The dragon's got a torn wing membrane. Probably infected. Can we move them? Jake asked. We'd better. They've got maybe 3 days left if we don't. Lisa's voice was matter-of-fact, but Felix heard something underneath it. Anger. Not at them. For them. Jake crossed the room and crouched down, bringing himself to Felix's eye level. The movement was deliberate, non-threatening. We're taking you both to our ship. We'll get you fed, healed, and home. Okay. Felix blinked, his exhausted mind trying to understand. But the Emperor. We must wait for... Kid. Jake's voice was still gentle, but now it carried something harder underneath. Your Emperor left you here for a year. A whole year. We're not waiting for anyone. You're coming with us. Right now. The words hit Felix like a physical blow. Left you here. The truth he'd been avoiding for months, laid bare by a stranger. Scarix lifted his head, finding his voice for the first time in what felt like forever. The words came out small and confused but clear. Why would you help us? You're not even a dominant species. You owe us nothing. Jake looked at the baby dragon. Really looked at him. Then at Felix, with his violet skin gone pale and his body trembling from weakness. Something shifted in the human captain's eyes. Something protective and immovable, like a mountain deciding to shield you from a storm. Because you're kids, Jake said simply. His voice carried absolute conviction. And you need help. That's the only reason we need. The words didn't make sense. In the Empire, everything had a reason. A purpose. A calculation of worth and value. You helped those above you because you had to. You helped those below you only if it benefited you. You never helped strangers. You certainly never risked yourself for people who couldn't pay you back. But this human said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Lisa bent down and scooped up Scarix in her arms. The dragon was too weak to protest, too stunned to resist. Tom moved to Felix's side, offering his arm for support. Come on, kid. Let's get you out of here. As they helped Felix toward the door, he kept looking back. The beacon was still there, still pulsing its desperate signal into the void. Still calling for an emperor who had never come. 347 days of waiting. Of believing. Of faith in a system that had forgotten he existed. And 3 humans had shown up in less than a week after detecting the signal. For the first time since the doors had sealed, Felix wondered if the emperor was worth waiting for at all. The medical bay of the Persistence was nothing like what Felix had expected. In the Empire, medical facilities were cold places. Sterile. Efficient. Everything had its place and everyone knew their rank. Doctors treated nobles first, then officers, then common citizens in that exact order. Resources were allocated by importance, by value to the Empire. This place was different. It was warm. Chaotic. Tools scattered on tables. People moving with purpose but without rigid formality. And strangest of all, everyone seemed to actually care about their patients. Hold still, little guy, Dr. Kate Brennan said softly, running a tissue regenerator over Scarix's torn wing membrane. The small dragon whimpered, his body tensing with pain. Kate immediately pulled back, adjusting the settings. I know. I'm sorry. Almost done, I promise. She worked with the kind of patience Felix had only read about in ancient texts. Gentle hands. Soft voice. Like Scarix mattered. Lisa was there too, working beside the doctor. Her hands moved carefully through the delicate wing tissue, repairing damage that went deeper than Felix had realized. This tear goes all the way to the bone, she muttered, her face tight with concentration. Who did this? Security drone, Scarix whispered. His voice was still weak but stronger than it had been in the archive. When the facility sealed. The system thought I was trying to escape. It attacked me. Lisa's jaw clenched. For a moment, her hands stopped moving. Then she took a breath and continued working. Well, it was wrong. Dead wrong. And we're going to make sure you fly again. You hear me? You're going to fly. The certainty in her voice made Scarix's eyes brighten. From his own bed across the room, Felix watched them work. An 4-tube ran into his arm, pumping nutrients and medicine into his depleted body. He'd been watching them for 3 hours now. 3 full hours of careful, dedicated work. No one had ordered them to do this. No superior officer had commanded them to spend their time on 2 worthless strangers. No one was paying them extra. There was no reward, no advancement, no benefit to them at all. They just did it. Why? The word slipped out before Felix could stop it. Kate glanced over at him, her eyebrows pulling together in confusion. Why what, sweetie? Why do you care? Felix's voice cracked. In the Empire, resources are allocated by importance. By value. I'm a minor scholar. 4th rank. Scarix is a common dragon. No noble blood. No important family. We're not worth this effort. We're not worth your time. The doctor's expression changed. Shifted into something Felix couldn't quite identify. Sadness maybe. Or anger. But not at him. Never at him. She set down her tools and walked over to his bed. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. On Earth we have a saying. Leave no one behind. It means exactly what it sounds like. Every life matters, kid. Every single one. Doesn't matter if you're a king or a janitor. Doesn't matter if you're important or not. You're a person. That makes you worth saving. Felix stared at her. The concept was so alien, so completely opposite to everything he'd been taught, that his mind struggled to accept it. But that's not efficient, he said weakly. Resources are limited. You have to prioritize. You have to choose who's worth. No. Kate's voice was gentle but absolute. We don't. We choose to save everyone we can. That's what makes us human. Later, after Kate and Lisa had finished their work and declared both patients stable, Felix and Scarix were taken to the mess hall. The small dragon could barely walk, but Lisa had fashioned a kind of wheeled cart for him, muttering about building something better tomorrow. The cook, a broad-shouldered man named Frank with flour on his apron, greeted them with a huge smile. There they are. The guests of honor. He placed 2 plates in front of them, piled high with food. Felix stared. This is more food than we had in a month. Then you'd better eat up, Frank said, grinning. You're growing boys. Well, boy and dragon. Need to put some meat on those bones. He paused. Do dragons have bones? Or is it all scales and muscle? Never mind, doesn't matter. Eat. The food was incredible. Frank had spent hours researching their biologies, testing different combinations, making sure everything was safe and nutritious for both of them. He'd done it without being asked. Without expecting thanks. Scarix devoured his portion in minutes, then looked up hopefully at Frank. The cook laughed, a deep belly laugh that filled the room. That's what I like to see. A healthy appetite. He brought more. That evening, after they'd eaten until they couldn't move, Felix accessed the ship's database from the tablet Kate had given him. He read about Earth. About humanity. They were babies on the galactic stage. Barely 3 generations into space travel. No empire-spanning star systems. No ancient dynasties. No emperor at all. Just a loose coalition of nations that somehow worked together. Not through force. Not through submission. Through choice. Through cooperation. They have no hierarchy, Felix muttered to Scarix. The little dragon was curled up on a heated pad that Lisa had built specifically for him, complete with temperature controls. No absolute authority. No one at the top making all the decisions. How do they function? How does anything get done? Scarix yawned, showing rows of tiny sharp teeth. His wing was bandaged but no longer bleeding. Maybe they don't need someone at the top. Maybe they just help each other. Work together because they want to. That's not how civilization works. Every species needs structure. Order. Someone too. Isn't it though? Scarix's eyes were already closing. They saved us. The Empire didn't. Before Felix could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Tom's voice crackled over the intercom, tight with tension. Imperial Patrol, 3 light minutes out and closing. Captain wants all non-essential personnel to quarters immediately. Felix's hearts froze. Jake appeared in the doorway minutes later. You two with me? No. Storage Bay 3. Stay quiet, stay hidden. You're hiding us? Felix stood on shaking legs. Captain, if they find us on your ship, the Empire will execute you. Your entire crew. They'll. Let me worry about the Empire. Jake's voice had gone hard as steel. You're under my protection now. That means something. They followed him to the storage bay, a dark space filled with supply crates. Jake pointed to a gap between containers. Get in. Don't make a sound. Don't come out until I come back for you. Felix and Scarix huddled in the darkness as heavy boots echoed through the ship. Imperial officers. He could hear their voices, cold and authoritative, interrogating the crew. Your manifest shows you were near the Cathera system. Why? Scientific survey, Jake's voice answered smoothly. Collecting mineral samples from the asteroid belt. This is restricted space. Didn't realize. We're new to this sector. Won't happen again, officer. The interrogation continued. Felix held his breath, waiting for someone to break to reveal the truth. The Empire had ways of making people talk. But the humans lied. Smoothly. Casually. Protecting 2 strangers without hesitation. When the patrol finally left, Felix emerged from hiding, his whole body shaking. You risked your ship, he said, staring at Jake. Your lives. Your freedom. For us. Why would you do that? Jake just shrugged like it was the most natural thing in the world. That's what decent people do, kid. For the first time in his life, Felix began to understand something fundamental. Maybe the Empire's way wasn't the only way. Maybe it wasn't even the right way. Maybe these humans, with their chaos and their kindness and their complete lack of proper hierarchy, had figured out something the Empire had forgotten long ago. Maybe caring about others wasn't weakness. Maybe it was strength. The Imperial Dreadnought Eternal Authority materialized in space like death itself taking form. One moment the stars were clear. The next they were blotted out by a ship so massive it defied comprehension. The Persistence could have fit inside its main hangar bay 10 times over. Maybe 20. Velix pressed his face against the viewport, his breath fogging the glass. He'd seen Imperial dreadnoughts in educational holos, of course. Every citizen of the Empire learned about them. The ultimate expression of Imperial power. Ships that could crack planets. Ships that had ended rebellions by simply appearing in orbit. But seeing one in person was different. It was like staring at a mountain that had decided to fly through space. Weapon ports covered every surface, thousands of them, each one capable of vaporizing the Persistence in a single shot. "Oh, we're dead," Tom whispered from the pilot station. "We're so incredibly dead." On the bridge, Jake stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back. His face showed nothing. No fear. No regret. Just calm determination. The view screen flickered to life and suddenly they were staring at the Emperor himself. Velix had seen pictures, of course. Statues. Official portraits. But this was different. Emperor Thraxus filled the screen, ancient and terrible. His scales were the color of old blood mixed with gold. His eyes burned with power that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. He wore the crown of eternity, a circlet of pure crystallized authority that supposedly weighed more than a human child. When he spoke, his voice was like thunder rolling through a tomb. "You harbor Imperial subjects. Surrender them immediately." Behind Jake, Velix felt his legs go weak. This was the moment. The moment he'd been waiting for. The Emperor had come. After 347 days of praying, of believing, of keeping faith, the Emperor had finally come. His duty was clear. The codes were absolute. A subject of the Empire obeyed the Emperor in all things. Always. But Scarix pressed against his leg, and Velix felt the little dragon trembling. Small. Afraid. Remembering a year of darkness and abandonment. "They're not subjects," Jake said. His voice was calm. Almost casual. Like he was discussing the weather instead of facing the most powerful being in the galaxy. "They're people. Kids who you abandoned for a year." Velix's breath caught. No one spoke to the Emperor like that. No one. The Emperor's eyes narrowed to slits of molten gold. "You dare lecture me on duty? I am eternal. I am authority itself. I have ruled for millennia while species like yours were still learning to make fire. That scholar and dragon are mine by law and custom. By divine right." "They're not yours," Jake said simply. "They're not anyone's." The bridge was so quiet Velix could hear his own heartbeat in both his chests. Tom had stopped breathing entirely. "Captain Morrison." The Emperor's voice shifted, taking on a tone of false patience. The kind of voice you'd use with a child who was being foolish but might still be educated. "You have done well keeping my property safe. I acknowledge your service. I will reward your vessel with safe passage through Imperial space. A generous gift. But they return with me. Now." Jake's hands clenched behind his back. His knuckles went white. When he spoke, his voice was hard as iron. "No." Silence stretched across the void between the ships. The kind of silence that felt heavy. Dangerous. "No." The Emperor's laugh was like stone grinding against stone. "You're one ship. One pathetic little vessel held together with improvised repairs and human stubbornness. I have a battle fleet. I have weapons that can sterilize your entire planet from orbit. You're an insignificant species I could erase from existence with a gesture. And you say, no? That's right." Jake met the Emperor's gaze without flinching. Without looking away. "They stay until they choose to go. Not you. Not me. Them." Velix felt something break inside him. The courage or maybe the madness to step forward. "Great Emperor, I am ready to return. It is my duty to serve. I will come with you. I'll tell you that these humans were honorable, that they were kind," Scarix said suddenly. His young voice cut through the tension like a knife. "You forgot us. You left us to die in the dark. They came for strangers. They cared when you didn't." The Emperor's face darkened. Rage flickered in those ancient eyes. "You dare." "He's right," Velix heard himself say. The words came out as a whisper but they felt like shouting. "We waited. For a year we waited. You never came. Enough." The Emperor's roar shook the speakers, distorted them. For a moment, the view screen flickered with the force of his fury. "Captain Morrison, you have corrupted Imperial minds. You have challenged eternal law. You have made yourself an enemy of eternity itself." He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to something cold and final. I give you one cycle, one rotation of your pathetic planet, to surrender them both. 24 of your Earth hours. Or I will take them by force and burn your ship to atoms. I will scatter your molecules across the system as a warning to anyone who dares defy me. The transmission cut. The screen went black. The bridge was silent. Boss, Tom said quietly, his hands shaking on the controls. We should run. Jump to Earth space. Get to the fleet. They can protect us. We can. No, Felix interrupted. He was surprised by how steady his voice sounded. No, you've done enough. More than enough. I'll go. I'll tell him you were honorable. That you saved us and returned us properly. He'll let you live if I... Sit down, kid, Jake said. Not unkindly but with absolute finality. He reached out and activated the ship-wide comm system. His voice echoed through every corridor, every room, every corner of the Persistence. All hands, this is the captain. We've just made an enemy of the biggest empire in the galaxy. The Emperor himself has given us an ultimatum. Anyone who wants to leave, the shuttles are fueled and ready. No judgment. No shame. But I'm staying. Those kids stay free until they choose otherwise. He paused. Waited. No one left. Instead, voices started coming through the comm system. Captain, this is Lisa. I'm welding extra armor plates to the hull. Might buy us a few more seconds when the shooting starts. This is Frank in the galley. Cooking up what might be our final meal. If we're going out with full stomachs. Medical bay here. Dr. Brennan. I'm prepping for casualties. I'm not going anywhere. One by one, every crew member checked in. Engineers. Technicians. Scientists. Even the janitor. All 32 of them. Felix stared at these humans, these strange, soft creatures who would fight an empire for two strangers they'd known for less than a week. Why? The word came out broken. Why would you do this? Jake looked at him, then at Scarrick still pressed against his leg. He smiled, sad and tired and absolutely certain. Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply. And sometimes that's all that matters. Outside the viewport, more ships began to arrive. Imperial cruisers. Destroyers. Fighters. The fleet gathered like a storm of steel and fire, surrounding them. Felix counted them. Stopped at 40. They were all going to die. And somehow, that made him believe in humanity more than anything else ever could. The transmission went out across every frequency in known space. Every channel. Every network. From the core worlds to the outer rim, everyone heard it. Earth's response to the Emperor's ultimatum. But it wasn't what anyone expected. No president stood before cameras in a fancy suit. No general barked orders from a command center. Instead, the galaxy saw an elderly woman standing in a kitchen in Ohio. She wore an apron with flour on it. Behind her, a pie was cooling on the counter. Betty Morrison, 78 years old, grandmother of Captain Jake Morrison, looked directly into the camera with eyes that had seen wars and peace and everything in between. My grandson Jake, she said, her voice steady and clear, is protecting 2 children right now. That's what we raised him to do. That's what his parents taught him. That's what humanity does. She paused, wiping her hands on her apron. The Emperor says surrender them or face war. He says bow down or die. She leaned closer to the camera, and her eyes went hard as iron. Well, Your Majesty, you can go straight to hell. The feed cut to the official government response, transmitted simultaneously from every human colony, every station, every ship. The message was simple. 5 words that would echo across the galaxy for generations. We don't abandon those who need us. Not for threats. Not ever. Across known space, species watched in complete disbelief. The humans had lost their minds. They were suicidal. Noble, maybe, in that tragic way that stories were written about. But doomed. Absolutely doomed. One species couldn't stand against the Empire. Especially not one as young as humanity. The Emperor's deadline came and passed. 24 hours of Earth time expired. When the Imperial fleet returned, they came in force. 40 warships. Enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds. The Eternal Authority led them, massive and terrible, with the Emperor himself commanding. They expected to find the Persistence alone. One small human ship waiting to die bravely. Instead, they found 73 human vessels waiting in formation. Military frigates from Earth's Defense Force. Cargo haulers that had dumped their loads and armed themselves with whatever weapons they could mount. Mining ships bristling with improvised cannons. A colony transport that should have been carrying families to a new world. Even a luxury cruise liner that had diverted from its pleasure route, its wealthy passengers now manning gun positions alongside the crew. Volunteers. Every single one of them. They'd come from across human space, dropping everything, leaving jobs, families, safety, coming to stand between the Empire and two children they'd never met. "This is Admiral Patricia Hayes of the Earth Defense Force." The transmission crackled across all channels. "The children stay free. You want them? You go through us. All of us." On the bridge of the Persistence, Felix watched the human fleet assemble through the viewport. His chest felt so tight he could barely breathe. "They're going to die," he whispered. "All of them. For us. They're all going to die." "No," Scarrick said softly. The little dragon had his face pressed against the glass, watching the ships take position. "They're going to fight for us. There's a difference." The Emperor's face appeared on every screen in the system. His rage was terrible to behold. "So be it. Humanity has chosen extinction. I will erase your species from the stars as a lesson to all who would dare." The first Imperial salvo launched. Missiles streaked through space like falling stars. And then something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to tear open. A dragon materialized between the fleets. Not a small one like Scarrick's. A true dragon. Ancient. Massive. Her scales were polished obsidian, each one the size of a human. Her wings could have wrapped around a small moon. "Mother." Scarrick's gasped, pressing against the viewport. Lady Kira's voice boomed across every frequency, drowning out even the Emperor. "Emperor Thraxus, you forgot my son." The Imperial missiles stopped. Froze in space. No one dared fire while an ancient dragon spoke. "You abandoned him," Lady Kira continued, her voice cold enough to freeze suns. "You left him to die in darkness for a year. These humans, these strangers you call insignificant, they saved him. They came in days while you never came at all. Lady Kira, you overstep your bounds." "No." Her roar shook space itself. "You overstepped. You forgot your sacred duty. I stand with humanity." Behind her, 3 more dragon matriarchs appeared from nowhere. Ancient beings older than most civilizations. Then came others. Felix's own people, a clan of scholars who'd lost family members in forgotten facilities across the Empire. Minor nobles whose children had been abandoned. Common citizens deemed too insignificant to matter. They appeared by the dozens. Then hundreds. Not to fight. Just to stand there. To be witnessed. The Emperor's fleet hesitated. "How many have you forgotten?" Lady Kira demanded. "How many lives are beneath your notice? How many children left to die alone in the dark?" She gestured toward the human fleet. These humans noticed. They cared. They came. They risked everything for strangers. Across the Empire, on 1,000 worlds, the message spread. Citizens watched as their Emperor faced the truth. How many times had the bureaucracy forgotten someone? How many times had paperwork mattered more than people? How many had died waiting for help that never came? And they watched as humanity, a species with nothing to gain, everything to lose, stood up for 2 forgotten children. The Emperor faced an impossible choice. Escalate to genocide and prove humanity's point about imperial cruelty. Or retreat and show weakness before the entire galaxy. He chose retreat. "This isn't over," he transmitted, his voice cold as deep space. "Humanity has made an eternal enemy today." Jake's response was simple, almost casual. "Get in line." The Imperial fleet vanished, jumping to warp space in perfect formation. 3 months later, Felix sat in a lecture hall at Earth's Xenocultural Academy, taking notes on human history. He'd chosen to stay. To study these bizarre humans and their philosophy of caring about strangers. Scarrick's visited every weekend, flying in with his mother. His wing was perfect now, stronger than before. Lisa had made sure of that. That evening in his small apartment near campus, Felix opened his private journal and wrote, "I waited 1 year, 3 months and 14 days for an emperor who never came. Humanity arrived in 3 days for strangers they'd never met. The emperor called them insignificant. Weak. Temporary. But I finally understand what makes them dangerous. They care. Not because they have to. Not because it benefits them. They care because they believe every life has worth. The empire rules through fear and power. Humanity leads through something far more terrifying, hope. I no longer wait for emperors. I stand with humans. And may the galaxy help anyone who stands against them." Outside his window, he could see Betty Morrison's house down the street. She'd invited him for dinner tomorrow. Something called pot roast. She'd promised to teach him how to make it. Felix smiled and closed his journal. Some things he'd learned were worth waiting for. Humanity wasn't one of them. They simply showed up.